Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Katrina Lane, coming at you a little bit late with the theory of social cognitive, self-concept theory, and the theory of moral development. By the end of today's lesson, students will be able to discuss the aforementioned developmental cognitive theories in children, and as well as apply them and their theoretical concepts to their professions within the classroom. Let's get started with social cognitive theory. Social cognitive theory was first proposed by a man named Albert Bandura. It began in the 1960s as the social learning theory and then developed into social cognitive theory later on in 1986. Social cognitive theory states that learning occurs in a social context with the reciprocal interaction of the person, his or her environment, and the expressed behavior. Social cognitive theory is based on social influence and the external and internal reinforcements of those influences. Social cognitive theory can also help explain if, how, and why certain individuals engage in specific behaviors. We can also use social cognitive theory to help predict behavior. However, behavior observed is not immediately imitated. SCT proposes that there are 4 mediational processes between observed behavior and its imitation. The first of these processes is attention, and that involves how much of the behavior is actually noticed. Students who observe a lot of the behavior, as in daily, are more likely to imitate it than those who only see it for but a second. This continues with behavior retention. How much is the student actually remembering of this behavior? The third is reproduction. Is the child capable of performing the behavior witnessed? Are there physical limitations to actually enacting it? The fourth mediational process is motivation. Does the child want to perform this behavior? Are there rewards for performing it? Are there punishments for performing it? Here, this child has a choice. These choices were best exemplified in Bandura's Bobo doll experiment. Children were modeled aggressive acts and then given a doll in an isolated room. Those who observed the modeled aggressive acts were more likely to enact them on the Bobo doll within the room than those who were not modeled aggressive acts. Take a moment to observe this boy who had been modeled aggressive acts with the Bobo doll.
The model pummeled the doll with the mallet.
Here he is hitting it, repeatedly throwing it,
In the air.
kicking it,
Threw it down and beat it.
throwing it to the ground and hitting it some more, using a tool, the mallet.
Seeing others vent aggression would drain the viewer's aggressive drive. As you can see, exposure to aggressive modeling is hardly cathartic.
The voice you may hear in the video is that of Albert Bandura, explaining what the boy is doing. He continues over and over again to perform these aggressive acts on the doll.
Exposure to aggressive modeling increased attraction to guns, even though it was never modeled. Guns had less appeal to children who had no exposure to the aggressive modeling.
What's interesting here is that the child was never modeled gun use. He found it and chose to accelerate his aggressive behavior on the doll with his weapon. In contrast, children who were not modeled aggressive acts with the Bobo doll chose to give him hugs, chose to play with him, and chose acts of kindness or no acts at all towards the doll. However, those who were modeled aggressive acts repeated those aggressive acts. Social cognitive theory, then, in school-age children can be expressed in the following ways. Behavioral capability. Students know what to do and how to do it. Observational learning. Students observe behavior of others and repeat it. Reinforcements, internal and external, positive or negative. Expectations, those will come from previous experience, like their former teachers. Anticipated consequences. And self-efficacy, the confidence in the ability to perform the behavior. We as teachers need to use this information when constructing what we expect from our children in behavior. Let's reflect. How can a teacher use the precepts of social cognitive theory to construct desired behavior in the classroom? That is, if behavior is learned through observation, what would you like your students to observe from you? Let's move on to self-concept theory. Self-concept theory was first proposed by Carl Rogers, and it describes how someone perceives themselves. We have self-image, or how you view yourself. We have self-esteem, how much value you place in yourself. And then we have our ideal self, which can be exemplified by the woman in the tight red dress standing to the right of the mirror. Self-concept involves what you look like, your physical description, your social roles, sister or wife or mother, your personal traits, and your existential awareness of self. Developing an awareness of self begins during Piaget's described pre-operational stage. This incorporates beliefs about your physical characteristics, children describing themselves as having, for example, yellow hair, being tall. It also involves your personality traits, describing yourself as maybe shy or maybe funny. And it also involves your beliefs about your social components or how you belong within certain groups. For example, I'm an artist, I'm a reader, maybe a certain religion, I'm Catholic. Take a moment to reflect on your own personal self-concept. How do you see yourself physically? What are you like on the inside? What are your social roles? These ideas of self have a dual composition. It involves the components of your past self, that is your experiences, your accomplishments, your failures, and the concept of your future self, which may or may not conflate with the ideal self. What are your goals? What are your hopes? And take a moment to reflect. How do these combine to create your present self-concept, who you are today? Are you a dreamer, like the little girl on the left, smiling? Or maybe a little down? Maybe you have more failures and accomplishments than the child on the right. How does this affect who you are today? Self-concept affects social behavior. For example, if there are cultural differences in self-concept, influences on thoughts, feelings, and behavior, different group membership, or maybe not acceptance into group membership, and also these ideas of self-consciousness and embarrassment. All of these different factors are going to influence how our students believe in themselves or how they see themselves, and how they see themselves is going to show in your classroom. So let's take a moment to really reflect on this one. How can teachers foster a positive self-concept in all students? It's not always fostered at home, and it's not always carried into the home. So how can we at school foster that positive self-concept? Finally, let's talk about the theory of moral development. The theory of moral development was proposed by Lawrence Kohlberg, and it comes in 3 levels. The first level, pre-conventional morality, the second, conventional, and the third, post-conventional. Pre-conventional morality is observed in very young children, infants, as well as those of preschool age. And this involves children who understand right and wrong as a method of punishment. If I do this, do I get punished? If I don't do this, I don't get punished. Okay, I'm going to do that thing then. And it's entirely self-serving. Children at this age are very self-centered. As they get a little bit older, they progress into level 2, conventional morality. And this moves into what we think of as like a good girl or bad girl, good boy or bad boy. And it has a lot to do with conformity and adherence to rules and social order, obedience to authority. As children grow older, more teenage years, they enter into what is called the social contract and an understanding of universal moral principles as adult. That is right and wrong from a legal and moral perspective. Let's focus more on our aged students, the conventional morality in school-age children at level 2. Here, children begin to understand how they should and should not behave. They begin to understand rules and authority, obedience to those rules and authority, and who's in charge. Their moral principles are going to be derived from their home, from their family, from their culture, but also from their classroom and in their school climate. So take a moment to reflect. What is your role as a teacher in guiding the precepts of conventional morality in your students? What influence do your personal values have on your guidance in developing morality in children? And finally, how can you teach and model moral values in a culturally responsive classroom? Thank you so much. I look forward to reading your results or your responses in the discussion.